If you look at this one, my screen tells you the third side, yours does not. How would we find our missing side if you're given two sides of a right triangle? The Pythagorean theorem. We're not going to do that right now, but you do need to be able to do that. Your missing side is 24, so just go ahead and write it in. So you're writing it in, 24. That's the first question. All right, so we're going to find the value of each trig ratio from the smallest acute angle to the nearest thousandth. We are actually going to also leave it as a fraction because your quiz tomorrow, I believe, wants a fraction. So before we do anything, we need to figure out which is the smallest acute angle.
X.
Why is it x?
Because 18 is the smallest.
Yeah, it's across from the shortest side. Good. So that means 18 is my opposite. What's my hypotenuse?
30.
30, and then my adjacent is 24. So we'll start with sine. Sine from the angle of x will equal the opposite over the hypotenuse. So the opposite is
18.
18 over the hypotenuse,
30.
30. This reduces to?
3 over 5.
Oop, yep, she's right. It is 3/5. They're both divisible by 6. So if you divide by 2, you would divide again by 3. So 3 over 5, we're going to write that as a decimal as well. It is 0.6. If you want the zeros at the end, because this is rounding to the thousandth, you can, but you do not need them by any means. Now we're going to do cosine of x. So cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So the adjacent is 24 over the hypotenuse. These are both divisible by 6, so 24 over 30 reduces to 4/5, which is equal to 0.8. Again, if you want the zeros, you can have them. Last is tangent from x, and it equals the opposite over the adjacent. So the opposite is over the adjacent. This reduces to 3/4, which as a decimal is 0.75. Good. All right, we're going to write the expression in terms of cosine. So what word especially do I need in order to write in terms of cosine? I need cosine, cos. We're going to, the simplified version. And then, how do I figure out what number to put behind cosine? Subtract from? 90. 90 minus 9 is? 81. Ta-da. Please make sure, I've seen over the years people put other things. Do not put an equal sign here. It doesn't go here. It will be marked wrong. It literally should only say cosine of 81. That's it. Okay, cosine of 81. The next one, sine of 30. So we're going to write cosine. 90 minus 30 is 60. Good. Cosine 90 minus 77 is 13. Write the expression in terms of sine. So this time we're going to write sine. 90 minus 15 is 75. Sine 90 minus 83 is 7. Oop. And then last, sine of 90 minus 45 is 45. Ta-da! Flip. All right, so solve for the missing values using trig functions. So I think that the quiz is actually harder than the test, only for this reason. The quiz doesn't tell you all the time which trig ratio to use, sine, cosine, or tangent. The test I made sure did for the most part. So tomorrow you're going to have to decide which trig ratio to use. So in order to know that, the number one thing you need to do is label your sides. Look at that. So label the sides they give you. We're going to label them, but yes. It's okay. You're ahead of me. From 25, what kind of side is it? 12? Opposite, and x is?
Adjacent.
So which trig function are we going to use? Tangent. Tangent from what angle? 25. And it equals the opposite, 12, over the adjacent x. Do I need to flip this one? I do. If I flip one side, I have to flip the other. Oop. I want everyone to be practicing plugging this in because I can't help you tomorrow plugging it in. I'm going to multiply both sides by 12. So every single person should be typing this in their calculator. You got 12 times a fraction of 1 over tangent of 25. I believe on your quiz it rounds to 10th. So what do we get? 25.7. All right, that's it. Solve for the missing values using trig functions. So all of these sides are labeled x, y, 16, so we need to label all of them in comparison to 41. So which one of these is my opposite?
X.
And then which one's hypotenuse? And then y is adjacent. So we need to decide which variable we want to solve for first. Sure. So if we are solving for x, we need to use that side and then the side they gave us, which was 16. So which trig function uses opposite and hypotenuse? Sine. It's okay. Sine from 41 equals the opposite, which is x, over the hypotenuse, which is 16. Do I need to flip this one? I don't. So I'm just going to multiply by 16. So this one should not have a fraction in your calculator. Is yours like ours or different? Possibly. It might just be older. I can look at it in a minute and make sure. All right, what do we get? 10.5. All right, and then we're going to solve for y. So y is the adjacent, and then what other side do I want to use? The hypotenuse again. So which trig function is that? Cosine from 41. And it equals the adjacent, which is y over the hypotenuse 16. Do I need to flip this? No. What? So what I want you all to see, because I'm not seeing it on the homework. Did I just circle 10.5 and 12.1?
No.
No, I had to write x equals and y equals. So you need to make sure you're telling me what variable is which, because if I don't see it, it's wrong, okay? What happens is some people, what is the only difference between this equation that we found x and this equation we found y?
Sine.
The sine and cosine. So sometimes people will set up the equation with the wrong sine or cosine. So they'll have the correct answers but labeled in the wrong sides. Does that make sense? Which makes it wrong. So I have to be able to see which side are you saying is 10.5, x is 10.5, and y is 12.1. You have to label it, okay? That's all I'm asking. You can go ahead and flip. Solve for the missing values using trig functions. So again, we're going to label our sides. What kind of side is the square root of 3? Opposite. And then x is? So which trig function are we to use? Sine. You're okay. It's okay. Sine from what angle? 30. And it equals the opposite, the square root of 3, over the hypotenuse, x. Do I need to flip this one?
Yes.
I do. So on the left, I have 1 over sine of 30. On the right, I have x over the square root of 3. So now I'm going to multiply by the square root of 3. We're going to leave it like a radical. Okay, so I need to look at it, that's all. You're probably in it in a second. We're going to finish and then I'll help you. You are going to get a radical answer.
You gonna use it?
You did not type in the same thing. You need to type in a fraction, but you're missing your fraction. All right, we should get 2 square root of 3. 2 square root of 3. Don't put this paper away. We're going to write down 2 problems.
Would you put it in the decimal form?
No. Because what you're going to do with this tomorrow is find sine, cosine, and tangent with it. You don't want a decimal. So just leave it like this. If it ever says leave in simplest form, this is what it means by simplest form. If it ever says round to the nearest, then you would make it a decimal. You're going to stay on this paper. You're going to draw these 2. We're going to refresh our memories on how to solve for missing angles. Solve for missing angles. I'll give you a minute to write it down. So we said, we don't need the other side. We said whenever we're solving for a missing angle, you're going to use, start with an I. I-N. The in what? Inverse. So that inverse looks like sine to the negative 1, cosine to the negative 1, tangent to the negative 1. So anytime you're missing an angle, this is what you're going to use. So we're going to pick an angle on our first picture to solve for. A, sure. So from A, we're going to label our sides. What kind of side is 5 centimeters? Adjacent. And what kind of side is 10? So which trig function deals with those 2 things? Cosine. From what angle? A. It will equal the adjacent, which is 5, over the hypotenuse, which is 10. You can reduce this if you want to, but it's not crucial. I want angle A by itself. What's on the same side as angle A? Cosine. So the opposite of cosine, to get rid of cosine, this is where you're going to use the inverse. So you're going to use cosine of negative 1. So shift cosine on your calculator. And then what do you type in from there? 5 over 10, or 5 divided by 10, same thing. All right, and then what do we get? 60 degrees. Shift cosine of 5 over 10. Oh no. So technically you could figure out the other angle without doing trigonometry, but if you were wrong and you just solved it because you know the angles add to 180, you would be wrong again. So I would wait until you're more comfortable with this before you do that. So we're going to solve for B. What kind of side does 5 turn into from B? Opposite. And then my hypotenuse is my hypotenuse, yeah. So which trig function would I use?
No. Sine.
I would use sine. So sine from B. So we're on the same problem. Sine from B. We're on this problem. We still need to find angle B. Sine from B is equal to the opposite, which is 5, over the hypotenuse, which is 10. So how do I get sine by itself? Yeah, sine negative 1. So shift sine. All right, so what do we get? 30. This makes sense. How many degrees fit inside of a right triangle, or a triangle in general? 180. What's 30 plus 60? 90 plus 90 is 180. That should happen every time. So we're going to do the same thing with the second triangle. I'm going to make this a little smaller. Which angle do we want to solve for first? Sure. Sorry. E. What kind of side is 4? Adjacent. And what kind of side is 6? So which trig function am I going to use? Tangent from angle, what do we say? E equals opposite, which is 6, over the adjacent 4. So to get rid of tangent, I have to do the inverse. So that would be tangent to the negative 1 and tangent to the negative 1. So shift tangent of 6 over 4, what do we get? Rounded to the nearest tenth. 56.3. Good. We're going to do the same thing, but from F. From F, what kind of side is 4 now? Opposite, and then 6 is. So which trig function are we going to use? Tangent from, what do we say, F, and it equals opposite of 4 over 6. This is especially why labeling your answers is important. So we're going to hit the shift button. Tangent to the negative 1 of 4 over 6. What do we get? 33.7. So again, all three of these angles should add up to 180. Good way to check.